So next we have to discuss how do I actually solve an inequality, and the way that I'm going to suggest doing it is graphically. There is a way to do it using algebra, but we pretty much teach it how to use it using graphs, or how to solve it using graphs. So two key pieces of information that you'll need to solve. You need the zeros, and you need a sketch of the graph from the calculator is totally fine. And then what we're looking for to solve the inequality is when is the graph above, which would indicate a greater than symbol, or below, so that means your inequality had a less than symbol. So when is the graph above or below whatever the specified value is in your problem? So if the specified value is a 0, which it commonly is, then we will be looking above or below the x-axis. And then I will be asking for your answers to be written on a number line, to use inequality notation, so like x is less than 2, and then also to use interval notation. So that's kind of the new piece that we're going to be practicing. Okay, so let's go through an example here. So you're solving the inequality x squared plus 3x minus 10 is greater than 0. So I'm just going to make a little note. Greater than means I am looking above. And since they said 0, I'm specifically looking above the x-axis. So I need to sketch a graph. So I'd get out my calculator, and all that you're putting in the calculator is x squared plus 3x minus 10, so that you can see what the parabola looks like. Okay, so it looks something like that. And then step 2, you need to find the zeros. So again, these are the two things that were the key information you needed. So the zeros, I'm going to find that by factoring, and that's actually my expectation for you as well, that you are not necessarily relying on the graph or the table. I also want you to back it up by doing the factoring. So there is a small amount of algebra I'm expecting you to do. So in this case, I figured out what adds to 3 multiplies to negative 10. So I wrote down x minus 2, x plus 5, and then the zeros are positive 2 and negative 5. So I'm going to mark that off here on my graph. Okay, and then step 3, it says above or below, write your answer. So I already noted that we are looking above the x-axis to solve this. So if I change colors here, so this segment and this segment, these are both above the x-axis. Okay, so the x-axis will cut this parabola into different parts. So above the x-axis from the left of negative 5, and then also to the right of positive 2. So then with the number line, I want to mark off negative 5 and 2. And so then the question of the open or closed circle will depend on the original problem. So we need to look back at the original inequality. So in this case, because it was a greater than symbol, then we want to do open circles. Okay. So an open circle at negative 5. So notice you don't have to number every single number, but they do have to be like accurately far apart. Okay, so I did an open circle at negative 5 and open circle at positive 2, and that will always be the case, is that you're marking off the zeros on the number line. And then since I shaded in up here in red, I shaded in on the left side of negative 5, then my number line is going to be shaded in on the left side of negative 5. And then also, since I shaded in to the right of positive 2, I have to do the same thing, shade to the right of positive 2 on my number line. So then the inequality notation, because there's two different inequalities, or two different parts of the number line, there's going to be two different inequalities. So we're going to say x is less than negative 5, or x is greater than 2. And so then the interval notations, remember we said that if there is no starting and stopping point for the interval, then we're going to have to use infinities. So up here, that first shading part it begins at negative infinity, and it ends at 5 with an open circle. And then the second section, it starts at 2. So notice I'm reading my number line left to right. So it starts at 2, and then it keeps going and going and going. So we'll say its ending value is positive infinity, both with a round parenthesis. And then because I do have 2 intervals, I'm going to use that little U in the middle, saying that I want to join the 2. Okay, so example 2, x squared plus 10x plus 9 is less than 0. So in this case, we can see less than would indicate I want to look below. And because it says 0, I'm specifically looking below the x-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch the graph. Calculator is fine to do that. Find the zeros by factoring, so it adds to 10 but also multiplies to 9. That gave me x plus 1, x plus 9. And then my zeros are negative 1 and negative 9. Okay, and then we're going to actually solve the inequality. So if I change my colors so I can do a little shading, up here we said below the x-axis. So that would indicate this whole section here. That is all below the x-axis. So we're definitely looking below. And then our number line is going to have open circles because of the original inequality symbol. And then also for interval notation, I am going to be using parentheses. Okay, so moving on to the number line, let me go ahead and mark it off a little bit. Okay, so I just marked off a few numbers. Again, we have open circles at the zeros at negative 9 and at negative 1. Now this time I shaded to the right of negative 9 and also to the left of negative 1. So essentially I shaded that whole area between negative 9 and negative 1. Okay, so all of this work that I'm going to show you here is how to say that you're shading or you're including areas between two numbers. So I shaded between them on the number line. My inequality notation, you want to write it like this. So x is between, and again, the lower number needs to be on the left, the higher number on the right. So the way that you would read that, if you were trying to like talk it through to yourself, x is larger than negative 9, but less than negative 1. So this is a way of saying that something is between two values. And then the interval notation is actually easier this time because you have a starting value, negative 9, and you have an ending value at negative 1. And so since they're open circles, they're both going to be parentheses. And that would be my interval notation. Okay, and so here's my last example. I'm going to go ahead and make my sketch for this one. Marking off the zeros. Okay, and again, these just have to be really rough sketches. So this time it says that this is not a quadratic, it's just a different polynomial. When is it greater than 0? So I'm looking above. I found the zeros by factoring, so I did factor by grouping. The first factor, x squared minus 9, it did give me 2 zeros, which I saw when I did the graph anyways, so I'm just, again, you're verifying all these zeros and making sure that you're accurate with the numbers. And then down below, so what sections am I looking at? So above. So this section here is above, and this section here is above the x-axis. So this was -3, +3, +8. So if I mark off those same numbers, kind of ran out of room on my number line. Okay, so there we go. So we're going to have, again, open circles. And parentheses when I do my interval notation, the round parenthesis. So we're going to have an open circle at -3. And then I shaded between -3 and +3. Okay, so that's that first red section that I shaded. And then my shading started again at +8. Oops, sorry, I wanted that to be an open circle at +8. And then I was shading to the right. So it started at +8, and then I'm shading on the right side of it. So same thing here on the number line, as I want to shade to the right of +8. So again, I have two different sections. So my inequality notation in this case is going to be kind of weird. For this first one, if I want to say between these two numbers, again, this is the notation to say that something is between. So the smaller value less than x, less than the larger value. And then those could be equal to symbols, less than or equal to symbols if the original problem was. Okay, so that's my first inequality, or the first section that was shaded. Or this one over here, since I'm shading to the right of 8, we're going to say x is larger or greater than 8. And so x is representing the part that I'm shading. So then the interval notations, again, we're going to have two different intervals. So this first one, we're going to start at -3, end at +3. Open circle, so we're going to do the round parenthesis. And then the little union symbol, because there's going to be a second one. Okay, and then this one over here starts at +8, and then it keeps going to the right, so we're going to use +infinity as my second value. And again, both of those will have a round parenthesis.